Central pawn push immediately contests the board's heart, aiming for solid development. Establishing central presence mirrors white's ambition, instantly creating a symmetrical struggle for piece mobility. Challenging the center immediately, creating an imbalance and forcing black to decide the pawn's structure. Solidifying the central pawn chain, this choice often leads to a more positional game, emphasizing pawn structure and piece development over immediate tactical fireworks. Developing a knight to its natural square, nc3, exerts pressure on d5 and prepares castling, while the pawn structure remains solid. This solidifies black's pawn structure and prepares for castling, gracefully sidestepping any immediate tactical fireworks. Developing the knight to f3 prepares castling and reinforces the central pawn structure, aiming for a harmonious piece deployment. Developing a piece, the knight prepares to join the central skirmish and potentially challenge white's central pawns. Pinning the knight immediately offers a tactical edge and aims to disrupt black's harmonious development. Challenging the bishop's placement, black initiates a pawn chain adjustment, subtly preparing for king safety while potentially weakening the kingside light squares. Retreating the bishop preserves the pin and maintains queenside pressure, avoiding immediate piece exchanges. Securing the monarch is paramount. This castling solidifies the king's safety and prepares for queenside action. Solidifying the center and preparing development, this unhurried step quietly bolsters white's pawn structure while keeping options open for future pawn advances. Preparing to challenge the center and potentially open a diagonal for the queen is a sound strategic ambition. Securing the bishop's diagonal allows for a potential queenside expansion, eyeing pressure on black's queenside structure. Developing the bishop to b7 aims to challenge white's central pawn structure and potentially activate the queenside. Exchanging the bishop opens lines for your attack and creates doubled pawns for black. Recapturing with the bishop clarifies the center and opens a diagonal for the queen. Clearing the center pawn structure liberates the d-file, potentially opening avenues for queenly pressure. Opening that central file offers dynamic counterplay for black's pieces. Probing the queenside, b4 seeks to gain space and potentially launch a pawn storm against black's king. Challenging white's queenside expansion, this pawn push immediately injects life into the center and opens new avenues for black's pieces. Exchanging pawns on the queenside opens diagonals for your bishops, potentially creating attacking opportunities. Reclaiming the pawn opens a diagonal for your bishop and creates a strong central pawn presence. Asserting influence over the open c-file, this rook readies to exploit the pawn structure's vulnerabilities and pressure black's king. This aggressive queen sortie immediately probes white's kingside defenses and prepares to disrupt white's pawn structure with a battery. Centralizing the queen prepares for pawn advances and pressure on black's queenside structure. Sacrificing the central pawn opens lines and creates active counterplay for black's queenside pieces. Reclaiming the central pawn reestablishes control and frees the queen to challenge the c-file. Unleashing the rook after a tactical exchange, this forces white's king into a slightly more exposed position and opens up lines for black's pieces. Reinforcing the central pawn chain, this knight repositions, preparing for a robust defense of the king and potential counterplay on the queen side. Trading queens here simplifies the position, initiating an endgame where the active rook on the b-file will be a significant advantage. Shifting the king to safety secures the monarch and prepares to contest the now open central files. Targeting the weakened d4 pawn with the bishop creates immediate pressure and prepares a central counterattack. Asserting control over the c-file immediately begins the fight for central influence and king safety. Opening the c-file now allows white to exploit that long diagonal with rook pressure. King's return to the center shores up weaknesses and prepares for a more active role in the ensuing strategic battle. Solidifying the knight's central presence initiates a strategic repositioning, aiming to contest the open files and alleviate queenside pressure. The rook pierces the 7th rank, creating significant discomfort for black's minor pieces and threatening to control vital squares. Introducing a mobile outpost on the queenside, this knight prepares to harass white's pieces and contest the vital open c-file. Reasserting central presence, the knight aims to occupy a more active square, preparing for potential pawn pushes and piece exchanges. Bringing the rook to the open file establishes crucial defensive coordination and prepares for potential pressure against white's isolated d-pawn. Seizing the open file for decisive pressure, this exchange simplifies the position and opens a path for white's king. Exchanging queens simplifies things, opening the c-file for your rook and simplifying the game toward a playable endgame. Restoring rook activity on an open file offers a dynamic fight for central squares. Re-establishing a bishop outpost on the 7th rank is a sound positional consolidation. Securing the queenside outpost with the pawn allows white to potentially exploit weaknesses on the c-file or pressure black's isolated queenside majority. Repositioning the bishop to a more passive diagonal offers little, allowing white to seize more central influence. Activating the rook on the queenside opens aggressive lines, aiming to exploit black's passive bishop placement. Stepping back from the pawn chain, the knight aims to bolster the queenside. Capturing that knight seizes a crucial outpost and opens lines for white's rooks to exploit the weakened queenside. Asserting the d-file as a new dominion, this knight redeploys to pressure white's weakened queenside structure. Recapturing the pawn and centralizing the knight offers a robust defensive posture, preparing for potential rook activity. Reinforcing the e-pawn offers a bit more structural integrity in this tense middle-game skirmish. Securing the advanced knight with the rook creates a potent attacking spearhead, threatening to infiltrate black's weakened queenside. Protecting the king is paramount. This repositioning aims to secure the monarch and prepare for potential central action. Reasserting central influence, the knight seeks to occupy key squares and coordinate its allies for a renewed assault. Probing for weaknesses, this pawn push opens lines but might overextend your king's protection. Clearing a path for the rook to the queenside, aiming to exploit the weakened pawn structure. Clearing a path for the knight to infiltrate enemy territory is a promising maneuver. Pivoting the rook to the 6th rank disrupts black's knight and forces concessions, aiming to exploit the open c-file. Unblocking the c-file allows counterplay, but the knight's retreat may prove to be a concession of tempo. Challenging the pawn structure with that rook lift forces black into a defensive posture, potentially opening lines for attack. Seeking a tactical reprieve, black prepares to contest the open file with the rook. Unlocking the knight's potential, this maneuver eyes the vulnerable pawn and threatens a breakthrough. Shifting the king towards the center now is a crucial step for improved defensive coordination and potential counterplay. Activating the knight to c4 seizes central influence and prepares to contest the open file. Shifting the bishop to a more passive diagonal allows white to reinforce their central control and prepare for further pawn advancements. Shifting the rook to the c-file offers immediate pressure and prepares to blockade the knight's potential advancements. The king ventures out, aiming to reclaim central influence and escape the queen's vigilant patrol. Pinching the enemy knight into a cramped corner simplifies the position favorably for white. Reclaiming the c-file with the rook aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and activate black's dormant pieces. This king's journey showcases a daring gambit to centralize power, prioritizing activity over material security. A valiant effort to activate the bishop, but it leaves the e7 square undefended, inviting further penetration. Aggressively pushing the pawn to d5 creates immediate central tension, demanding a precise response from black to avoid falling behind in development and space. Seeking active piece play, the rook embarks on a journey to the center, aiming to disrupt white's queenside presence. Reclaiming the central pawn advance offers a vital foothold to disrupt black's precarious king position. A desperate attempt to create complications, sacrificing pawn structure for activity. Activating the pawn's advance aggressively opens lines towards black's reshaped, vulnerable kingside. Pushing the rook forward to attack the pawn creates immediate counterplay and challenges white's central pawn structure. Asserting dominance over the central squares, this knight aims to disrupt black's pawn structure and potentially exploit weaknesses.